everybody to our 2026 ISBA priority session. I really am a very big advocate of this session. I think it's so important that beyond our members, we can bring the industry together to hear really what are the key priorities for brands this year. So you'll hear from the team, and I really want everybody to lean in, because this is all about how we work together as an industry to drive forward, to drive growth, and to get this industry moving. So please take notes as you go. Right, just on to some basic housekeeping. Please put yourself on mute. Very grateful. We'd really like you all to log in with your full name if you can, and Brian gets brownie points because he's put his company name. Thank you. If you ask a question, please do identify yourself, and any questions please put in the chat. So today, what we're planning to cover, Simon's gonna kick off to share what we've been hearing from brands over the end of last year and the beginning of this year, to set the context of why our 2026 and beyond strategy plan has, and how it's been convened, and then we'll go into our priorities with the rest of the team. Okay, and before we kick off, just a few parish notices of what's coming up in the next few weeks. We've got, I know we've got lots of members on the call, and many of you have done our learning and development sessions. So just to let you know, there's 2 101 sessions next week. Just remember, all of these 101 sessions are available, and as we come to talk about talent in the industry, these are more valuable than ever. And then just another session at the end of the month, middle of the month, and you'll hear a lot talked about effectiveness this morning, a maximum effectiveness session with Barb and Thickbox. And then lastly from me, just to say, if you haven't already seen it, this great guidance about proprietary media is available now, launched last week. So please have a read. Now I will pass you over to Simon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bobby. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. So as Bobby said, we're going to walk through the kind of industry context for our strategy and plans, why that context matters, what that means then in terms of our long-range strategy as ISBA, and our priorities for 2026. Now, I know we've got a kind of good mix of people on this webinar, the vast majority of whom are very familiar with ISBA, but some of you perhaps not so. So I guess the first thing to say is, obviously, as the trade body for advertisers in the UK, we are the voice of over 170 members, all UK advertisers, representing a whopping 6.2 billion of media spend in total. So we effectively have a big ear on the market, and everything that you are going to see today is very much about listening to our members and representing the interests and needs of our members. So what is that kind of context then that we have heard from our members? Well, perhaps not surprisingly, what we're hearing incredibly consistently is advertisers feel like they are under more pressure than ever before. Pressure to perform and to deliver, as always, but going through a period of time where really our whole industry is going through the biggest transition phase, the biggest period of change that really anyone can think of in living memory, whilst also navigating incredibly stormy waters. And all of that is really being driven and contributed to by a cocktail of internal and external challenges that our members are encountering on a day-to-day basis. So externally, there is a complex mix of really uncertain and disruptive challenges going on, none of which I'm sure will be a surprise to any of you, but it's the convergence of these things that is causing the primary issues. So in no particular order, the economic outlook is still an issue for people. Clearly, it is still incredibly uncertain. the cost of living is still an issue, still a concern for consumers. It is impacting supply chains differently across different industry sectors. It's putting pricing pressure on advertisers coming from both the retailers and the change in cost of goods in the supply chain. And of course, that whole combination of things, in particular, the pressure that consumers are feeling is netting out as an impact on sales. Secondly, there's the technological disruption that everyone is living at the moment, primarily driven by AI and attempts to kind of adopt AI both in the supply chain and as advertisers themselves. But the pace of change is the thing that is making this so difficult to grapple with. And the fact that it has knock-on implications for the broader tech stack and also knock-on implications for overall knowledge and skills within advertiser organizations. The market itself is also very volatile. The industry is very volatile. We've seen a lot of M&A activity already, and of course, there is a lot more potentially on the horizon. From media owners, of course, we've all heard about the potential acquisition of ITV by Sky, and there are potentially more agency group mergers on the horizon. We've seen IPG Publicis already happen, but there are noises about WPP, there are noises about Dentsu's international operation. And all of this has huge implications for advertisers' interests. And then last but not least, the regulatory space is also a kind of very active one at the moment with a lot of attention on it. We've got a government that's looking to increasingly tackle perceived public harms wherever they may lie. We've obviously seen at the beginning of this year the landing of the new LHF, less healthy food advertising regulations, but already the government are entertaining and proposing a new nutrient profiling model. And there are already noises, and have been for some time, around other industry sectors like gambling and alcohol. And of course, social media and the platforms are very firmly in the spotlight. So a huge amount of kind of disruptive stuff going on across the landscape, all of which is uncertain as to exactly how it's going to play out and at what pace. So that's the kind of external landscape that our members are dealing with. But there are internal challenges that are actually compounding all of those issues, challenges that are being encountered in the boardroom. In many cases, budgets are flat to shrinking. Not all, but in the majority of cases, budgets remain flat to shrinking. And marketing teams, advertisers are increasingly being asked to deliver the classic kind of more with less or at best more with the same. They're also encountering in the boardroom a poor understanding of marketing. Now, that's not a criticism of anyone, but it's just to say that for the non-marketeers, for the CFOs, the CEOs, etc., the understanding of how marketing really works is being misunderstood and redacted down to an actually unhelpful and misleading debate, effectively this tug of war between brand and performance. And in some ways related to that, what increasingly businesses are experiencing are these wild swings in growth strategy between short-term growth and long-term growth on 2 to 3 year cycles. The pendulum just keeps swinging, and businesses keep having these resets. Last but not least, this is all kind of being not made any better by the fact that we're seeing a lot of CMO churn in the marketplace, or CMOs, or whatever title that marketing happens to sit under. Those roles being effectively demoted off the kind of C-suite exec team and folded in underneath another role. So there's a declining role for marketing, a leadership role for marketing, and declining influence at the most senior levels in organizations, often tied to equally the high churn of CEOs. And obviously, when a new CEO is parachuted in, often it's with the brief that something was broken. We need you to come in and fix it. We need you to kind of reignite growth in the business. But then the temptation is to simply look at what was going on before, assume it wasn't working, and swing to the polar opposite. And that's driving people churn. That's driving strategy churn. That's driving this pendulum swing between short-term growth and long-term growth. So a huge amount of internal challenges that advertisers led by the marketeers are encountering. And then finally, there are challenges as well within the marketing and advertising process that really are kind of confined to, to marketing operations, but they are not easy to resolve. Measurement is becoming increasingly complex. Marketing effectiveness has always been a kind of topic of debate, but as the media mix continues to kind of expand, getting a single currency that can effectively measure entire campaigns is proving incredibly hard. And actually, despite a wealth of data in the marketplace, it tends to be quite fragmented, quite disparate, and that makes it very, very difficult to prove the business case for a kind of balanced approach to marketing investment. This is compounded by also a kind of misunderstanding of how the funnel has evolved. Not a misunderstanding amongst marketeers, but a misunderstanding amongst observers. And it's very hard for those kind of seasoned and experienced marketeers to really explain how marketing has evolved in a way that kind of takes other stakeholders on the journey with them. And there is a lot of talk, of course, of the funnel being dead, the funnel being defunct. And in some ways, that is absolutely true. So, of course, the toolkit, the marketing toolkit, has evolved wildly. And the number of kind of media channels and tools, routes to market available now to any business is vast. And in that respect, the funnel is dead because it is indeed no longer linear. The use of those marketing tools is no longer linear. There is no set pattern anymore as to how, a consumer may engage with a brand or a business or product. But what hasn't changed is human beings. And so the way in which human beings process information and respond to information, i.e. advertising, the way in which attitudes and behavior are affected, the way in which human beings make decisions has not changed. Human beings are still fundamentally emotive decision makers, and fundamentally there is still a need to go through a sequence in terms of their relationship with any given brand, product or service. The basic sequence being obviously the need to attract them, the need to engage them, the need to retain them. So the funnel in that respect is still linear. There is still a need to drive awareness, drive consideration, actually drive an engagement and a commercial transaction, retain a consumer, and then hopefully transition them into being advocates and loyal consumers with a healthy lifetime value. We're also seeing that creativity is most definitely suffering at a time where there's a huge amount of data, arguing for the commercial sense of creativity, the commercial impact of creativity, and this was discussed a lot at the LEAD conference a couple of weeks ago, where clearly, creativity is a huge driver of trust, is a huge driver of effectiveness and commercial return. But actually, in the current environment where there is an abundance of data and ubiquity of data within the C-suite, science is arguably trumping art. And what we're seeing is creativity getting squeezed and lots more decisions being made based on the data. The need to have data to prove every single kind of creative turn is arguably kind of stifling creativity. That is also not helped by the fact that over the last decade or so, we've gone from a model where the marketing assets traditionally were quite low in volume and high in value, which gave breathing space to the kind of art and craft of advertising and allowed for more creativity, to now a model today where the assets are very high in volume and therefore out of necessity lower in value, which actually then squeezes creativity, forces corners, to be cut because budgets are tight and because speed and urgency are of the essence. And then last but not least, we are consistently hearing concerns about a growing skills gap, amongst our members. And that skills gap resides at both the junior end of the spectrum and the senior end of the spectrum. At the junior end of the spectrum, there is acknowledgement that there is a growing dilution of knowledge of the fundamentals, marketing fundamentals, the media fundamentals. And at a senior level, we're seeing the first generation of marketeers knocking on the door of quite big senior leadership roles, but the generation who have grown up in quite narrow specialist verticals. And so those marketeers don't necessarily have the breadth of skills required of them to operate effectively in broad leadership roles. And we are hearing those concerns come through increasingly from senior leaders amongst our members. So all of this is leaving CMOs in particular wrestling with two major systemic questions. What on earth does all of this mean for my operating model going forward? And what does this mean for the implications for talent and skills? And in particular, what is playing on CMOs' minds here is the role that AI plays in all of this. The fact that it is a game changer, but an unpredictable game changer in all of this, is a concern because it makes it very hard to navigate the pathway forward. And just picking on the skills question, recognizing that there are already concerns about skills gap and skills decay, in the AI area, is this going to massively accelerate? Is this going to take on dimensions that are highly unpredictable? And does all of this mean that effectively, as an industry, we're sat on a hidden talent crisis that nobody's really measuring and nobody really knows how to deal with yet going forward? So net left unanswered, marketing teams could quickly become unfit for purpose. And that is something that is playing very heavily on the minds of the senior leaders within our member organizations. And we see this context reflected in conversations with members every single day. And this is just a snapshot of quotes that have come from a number of our members. And you can see everything from that we've touched on, from the tensions between short-term performance and long-term brand building, the tensions of how to build the skill sets of the marketeer in the future light of AI. The fact that operating models are going through huge transformations, but members don't feel like they've necessarily got the knowledge or skills to successfully navigate that. Therefore, the requirement to focus on training and what does that look like. The decay of kind of marketing influence in the C-suite and the need to re-establish marketing's influence there and the perception of marketing as a growth function. The external risks, in particular on less healthy food, but does that migrate to alcohol? Does that migrate to gaming and gambling, et cetera, and cross-media measurement, continues as we've touched on to be a huge challenge. So all of these things have been reflected. This is just a small snapshot of the quotes and the comments that we get from members on a weekly basis. So for the first time ever, then we've taken it upon ourselves to actually pull together a long-range strategic plan for ISBA, a 3 to 5 year strategic plan. And the reason we've done that is because the themes that we're seeing emerge from all of that are actually remarkably consistent with previous years and where we've been to date. And actually, we cannot see those consistencies changing in the kind of midterm horizon. So we think actually the focus areas are going to be remarkably consistent, but actually because of the pace of the change and the dynamics that we've gone through, how they manifest in any given year, we think is where the differences are going to play through. So what then are those areas? What is the kind of 3 to 5 year strategic plan? Well, our mission as ISBA is incredibly clear, for the foreseeable future. We are here to help our members navigate, shape, and succeed in the most complex and fast-changing advertising landscape in their living memory. That is what we're being asked to do. That is what we've always been here to do, and that is what we'll continue to do over the next few years. But with 3 focus areas. So you can boil all of that context down and really end up with 3 key strategic priorities for us. The first is enabling marketing effectiveness, advertising effectiveness, and trust in advertising. The second is ensuring transparency of supply chains. And the third is helping our members to navigate the future. And underneath each of those sit a kind of bunch of key work streams. So under effectiveness and trust in advertising, there are 3 key focus areas, 3 key work streams. So cross-media measurement, which includes for us continuing the scale up and rollout of Origin. Origin went live and went through beta test and started trading effectively last year. It has a pipeline of kind of clients that it is rapidly onboarding, and so this year is all going to be about continuing that successful journey to see further scale up and rollout and further onboarding of clients, and also more media channels. Next up there is advertising best practice, and really that encompasses two things: the case for a kind of more balanced approach to demand creation and conversion plans, which our members are struggling to build within their businesses. We'll come on and talk about that one in a lot more detail. And keeping abreast of those kind of marketing routes to market that are rapidly evolving, a bit more nascent, coming of age. That includes things like retail marketing, influencer, and the shift from SEO to GEO. And then lastly in that bucket, responsible advertising. So everything from sustainability of advertising itself and sustainability advertising, accessibility, inclusion, and everything in the regulatory affairs sphere. Under transparency of supply chains, obviously, the one that will be top of mind for many people is online safety in terms of both brand and user context. That is still a key area of focus and will be for across the horizon of this strategic plan, as will be the adoption of AI automated processes across the entire ecosystem. So whether that is creative, media, research, strategy, or within the kind of social media sphere within platforms, keeping a watching brief on how that environment is shifting and what that means for our members, and therefore what we need to focus on in terms of annual priorities is something that is firmly on our agenda. And last but not least, all of those things have flow-through implications potentially for agency operating models and therefore agency contracting and remuneration. That's a space that we've always focused on as ISBA and will continue to do so. And then lastly, when it comes to helping members navigate the future, as we've touched on, there is a lot of change afoot. Mergers and acquisitions, both in the media space and the agency space. What that means, taking into account as well AI adoption for agency operating models. What does that mean for talent inside agencies and inside advertisers? What does that mean for value chains and therefore the knock-on implications for advertisers? And then, of course, then advertisers' own operating models, in-housing versus outsourcing, AI integration, the implications for talent and skills and what the requirements are around that. All areas that we will continue to focus on over the next 3 to 5 years. So what does that mean then for our 2026 operating priorities? Well, what we'll do now is walk through each one of those strategic priority areas and share with you what then our plans are for 2026. So under each of those operating areas, there is an awful lot of kind of BAU activity for us at ISBA. When it comes to effectiveness and trust in advertising, as we've already touched on, that includes Origin, our own cross-media measurement tool that we have built. The market coverage continues to expand. Origin continues to scale, and we are starting to build use cases. We have 3 use cases now that we can start to share with people. There's been high demand for those, and so we plan to build more of those to help give insight into Origin's capability, which in turn will kind of accelerate its scale and its onboarding of new clients and new media channels. Secondly, we will continue to offer guidance in a number of areas as we've always had. This year, we will be focusing on the responsible media guide, the retail media framework, and an influencer code of conduct. Next up is trying to equip our members with the ability to forward plan. One of the key elements that our members' feedback consistently is really useful is the kind of forward-looking insight into media budget forecasts, and so we will be continuing that. And this year we will have a 2027 media budget forecast that we will share with members. The regulatory space, as we've already touched on, we anticipate being an active space this year. We've just obviously readjusted to the new LHF or HFSS kind of advertising regulations. We will continue to help our members navigate that and try and plot a path through the ASA enforcement appropriately. And we know that the new nutrient profiling model is being proposed by the government. So that, of course, is without question going to be a focus this year. And then in the responsible advertising space, we will, of course, continue to focus on the commercial case of best practice for sustainability, inclusion and accessibility. All of that is BAU for our activity. All of that is stuff that ISBA has already been focusing on and our members would expect us to continue to focus on. But for each of our strategic priorities, we also have one big bet. And that is a big bet that is not necessarily defined by us as ISBA. In some cases, it's defined by what's happening in the industry. In some cases, it's something that our members are advocating for. But in all cases, the big bets are things that will be industry shaping and or transformative for our members. And so in this space, our big bet comes back to this notion of the need for a definitive business case for a balanced cross-media approach to growth marketing. This is really being driven by what we're hearing from our members as being the single biggest challenge in the boardroom is that they are increasingly struggling to make the business case for a balanced approach to marketing that is the optimum for driving growth in their organizations. This is about that redacted debate that has got caught in this kind of tug of war between brand and performance, long and short, when actually that is not what anybody really ever meant. That is not what the data ever said. What we really know, we're all trying to talk about, is this balance between demand creation and conversion. And so this is our big bet. So to unpack that one a little bit more, it's very clear from our members and from other stakeholders that we have spoken to about this, that everyone acknowledges that the industry is caught in this misleading and counterproductive debate. It has become an either or a versus debate. It is brand versus performance. It is long or short. And that is not being driven by us as an industry. That's not being driven by agencies, by advertisers, by marketeers, by other stakeholders. This is just a misinterpretation that's happened in the boardroom, predominantly amongst CEOs and CFOs. So why has this happened when this was never ever what was meant, and it isn't what any of the data actually says? Well, we think redressing that narrative has inherent challenges, and it's why that kind of misinterpreted debate has embedded itself. Firstly, although there is, a brilliant collective body of compelling data-based evidence, actually those data sources are pretty disparate. There is not a single unit of measurement. There is not a single source to find all of the compelling evidence. There are many compelling sources of evidence, but they are disparate and fragmented. And taken in isolation from the vantage point of a CEO or a CFO, any one of those data sources could be seen as biased, which makes it very hard then to kind of wrestle back control of the narrative and course correct it. There's the additional problem of those leading the charge in the boardroom, predominantly the marketeers, the CMOs, are inherently on the back foot when they go in to have that debate. Because really, when they're talking about where should the money go, this balance between demand creation and conversion, brand and performance, it ends up becoming a pretty straightforward financial debate, either of, please, sir, can I have some more, a request of the CFO and the CEO, or can I rob Peter to pay Paul? And often the robbing Peter to pay Paul is take money out of performance and put it into brand. Well, that is a counterproductive debate from the get-go, because they're effectively saying, can I take money out of performance? The clue is in the name, this thing that drives commercial return, and put it over here into this thing called brand, which we've spent ages telling you is difficult to measure, is inherently quite expensive, and often it takes much longer to realize its full return on the business. And yes, by the way, I would like to give the money to the two people that I brought into the room to help me with this argument, my creative agency and my media agency. I'm being trite and I'm paraphrasing, but that is often the case. Marketeers are leaning with very positive intent and for all the right reasons on their agency partners to try and help present the case for this. But through the lens of the CEO and the CFO, these are a bunch of inherently biased people who've got skin in the game coming in the room to make an argument for something that just looks like a, well, of course you would say that, type argument. So it is very hard in that context for the CMO to be seen as objective. So what is this big bet about? This big bet is about a reset that champions sustainable business growth. This is about reclaiming the narrative and re-establishing marketing and advertising as an engine for growth. And it is not one versus the other. It is not about arguing for brand over performance or performance over brand. It is not about arguing for long versus short. It is about arguing for both. It is about arguing for a balance between demand and conversion. It is not going to be a silver bullet answer, because we are not suggesting for 1 second that there is an off-the-shelf, one-size-fits-all solution for every business. What that balance looks like will be different in different businesses and different industry sectors, depending on your own business context, depending on your business objectives. But in some ways, it's a bit like baking a cake. If every marketeer and their agencies are trying to bake the best marketing cake, the best advertising cake that they possibly can, we all know that there are some fundamental ingredients to a good cake, and that a good cake must have all of them. If you take out the butter, or you take out the eggs, or you take out the flour, or you take out the sugar, it's going to be a pretty bad cake. But what balance of those ingredients you choose is entirely up to you and your preferences. Equally, if you choose to embellish with chocolate drops or vanilla essence or whatever, that's entirely up to you. But fundamentally, the removal or the dilution down of key ingredients to such a minimal level that they may as well not be there results in a bad cake. And that is effectively what we're seeing in the advertising recipe, in the marketing recipe in our industry. So how will we do this? How will we make this happen? This is not going to be an overnight thing. This is not something that we are going to crack in one single year. This is part of our kind of 3 to 5 year horizon in our strategy. But the way we're going to go about doing this is doing what ISBA has always done well, convening the industry, uniting the industry to create a definitive business case and toolkit. So we plan to bring together trade bodies, media owners, platforms, together with leading research and data sources, organizations, individuals who are already well-known, credible sources of data and kind of conceptual thinking in these spaces. This is just a snapshot. This is not an exhaustive list, so apologies if you don't see your business or your logo up there. This is simply meant to be indicative of the notion of bringing together trade bodies, media owners, platforms on one side with leading research and data sources on the other. And we want everybody to contribute to the solution. This is, again, as I say, not about one versus the other. This is not about saying one is better than the other, or one should trump the next. This is about putting all of these credible sources, all of this thinking into the center of the room in a collaborative way to help produce the ultimate guide to growth marketing. So this is what we plan to do. This is something we will kick off this year. We'll be kicking it off by bringing the stakeholders together to convene a working group around this and to pull together a roadmap. There will be some deliverables this year, but as we say, the timeline and the exact nature of those deliverables is still to be confirmed. So we're going to move on now to the second area, and I'm going to hand over to Rob, who's going to do this one.
Thanks, Simon. Morning, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Rob Newman. I'm ISBA's Director of Public Affairs. I'm going to speak to you for the next few minutes about our second priority workstream, namely ensuring ad ecosystem transparency and transparency in supply chains. Clearly, there's a lot which exists under this, and as Simon said with regards to kind of workstream one, all of what we describe here as kind of business as usual, we know is critically important to many of our members. And that begins with the future of TV, with the evolution of the market, with consolidation, with definition, with trading, brought into sharp focus, of course, by the potential tie-up that we might see between Sky and ITV, where protecting advertiser interests is our primary concern. We're looking at agency consolidation. We want to help our members with awareness and understanding of the implications of the mergers and acquisitions which may be underway. There's agency contracting. Over this year, we'll of course be evolving our popular creative and media services frameworks. It's of course necessary to mention the growth of AI and of automated workflows there. We want to make sure we're helping ensure ongoing transparency and providing advocacy and guidance on appropriate practices there. I'll be coming back to talk much more about brand safety in just a moment. And Bobby's already mentioned the publication of our proprietary media guide and the ongoing dialogue we're having across industry there. So what's the big bet in this space? Well, previously in our priorities webinars in past years, I've signalled as Public Affairs Director where I think the greatest public policy pressure is going to be in our industry. Sometimes that's been specific to sectors, but one issue I've consistently highlighted, particularly in the run-up to the last general election and since, has been that of online safety. And after the events of the past year, that subject has moved ever further up the political agenda, up the social agenda, to the point where a week rarely goes by without a fresh debate or controversy now. And from what ministers are focusing on to the increasing volume among activists, it's our clear view that brand safety is going to be an issue which touches on every single one of our members in the months and years to come. So our second big bet is that ISBA and our members will need to show leadership in shaping the future of what we need to be a brand safe online environment. Now, those of you who are familiar, sorry, could you skip back a slide for me, please, boss? Thank you. Those who are familiar with ISBA will know that our pedigree in this area is long. In the aftermath of the Brands Funding Terror Times headline in 2017, we worked very closely and productively with Google and YouTube to help tackle ads appearing next to illegal content, identifying them, demonetizing them. Our consistent call all along has been for proportionate regulation of the big tech platforms, for transparency about the terms and conditions of those platforms in terms of what they'll permit on their services and sites, and for the actions they take to remove content which contravenes those terms, and for advertisers, for our members, to have access to that information so that you can make individual decisions about where you want to place your advertising spend. And we've continued to provide advice to our members operating in the UK, including most recently through our Responsible Media Guide, which among other things sets out the tools and levers which are at advertisers' disposal to try and ensure that ads aren't appearing in the wrong place. We've been absolutely clear from the get-go that we supported a proportional and robust legislative framework, and we supported the passage of the Online Safety Act through Parliament to try and bear down on the prevalence of harmful content and for action to be taken in the event of its being seen. But of course, as we see from the next slide, the challenge continues. The Online Safety Act is still relatively new. It's still being progressively brought into force by Ofcom. And the challenge, of course, is by no means limited to the walled gardens, to the platforms on the open web. An opaque programmatic system sometimes delivers legitimate ads to very illegitimate places with potentially appalling results. And we'll all recall the website Channel 3 Now, based in Pakistan, aggregating crime-related stories while posing as a US-style TV channel, sharing fake news about the Southport attacker, which went viral, helping to contribute to the violent disorder we saw on streets here in the UK, and ads did appear on that site. And we know that the government is extremely concerned to ensure that ad spend doesn't help to fund and amplify that kind of mis and disinformation again. On the next slide, in the meantime, of course, the debate continues to swirl about the role of the platforms in our society in general, and that's increasing in temperature all the time. We see litigation at the state level in the United States, including right now in Los Angeles, where lawsuits accuse Meta, Google, TikTok, and Snap of creating platforms which are functioning in an addictive manner. and in the European Union, where the Digital Services and Digital Markets Acts are being used on issues from consent and pay to ad transparency. It's a tug of war taking place between the US and the EU on regulation and on how the platforms operate. And incidents such as that which happened with Grok on X earlier this year and the proliferation there of CSAM and misogynistic content push governments to respond almost ad hoc. They're almost playing whack-a-mole with individual types of content, and it's leading them to threaten platforms with huge fines or with loss or denial of service in their markets if they don't comply with immediate remedial action. Here in the UK, as on the next slide, all of this is causing parliamentary interest, and crucially for us, it's putting advertisers in the crosshairs. The Science and Technology Select Committee's recent inquiry into social media algorithms and misinformation directly showed this. ISBA was called to give evidence. We were held to account for advertisers' spend and choices, and we were left with the clear understanding that politicians see us, because platform ecosystems are ad funded, as the enablers of a system which can, on occasion, drive harm. Now, we can't, as an industry, in our view, walk away from that, and we also don't think we would want to walk away from that. Although large advertisers may actually form only a certain percentage of platform funding, our role in the system is undeniable, but our power to advocate for change is also as undeniable. And we know government wants to see us play our part. And at the moment, we're engaged in conversations with ministers and officials about how we evolve what we can do as an industry. In that respect, and to the next slide, as I've also said previously at these sessions, a second Online Safety Act remains for me a real possibility at some point in the future. The Technology Secretary, Liz Kendall, is highly motivated by this area. She wants to see change. The Prime Minister has positioned himself directly as taking on harmful content and in taking on platform owners, and consistently announces new measures. And of course, we have a network within our own industry of very powerful advocates for brand and user safety, notably the work which the Conscious Advertising Network does with bodies such as the Molly Rose Foundation, set up in memory of the late Molly Russell. And in the round, we're seeing a very real surge in the societal pressure for change, from conversations on Mumsnet threads to the debate about a social media ban for under 16s. The whole landscape about the web, the platforms, their role in our society is changing under our feet. So our big bet is that that is going to result sooner or later in some fundamental changes to platform regulation and potentially to regulation of digital advertising in the round. And we want ISBA and our members to be leaders, not followers, in that change. This is coming. And if we don't work to help determine the outcome, it'll be determined for us. And in something with such importance to our members' day-to-day operations and to our reputation as a sector, our strong view is that we have to take a strong hand in it. How does that change manifest itself, and what will we be involved in? For a bit more on that, I'll hand over to our Director of Media, Steve Chester.
Thanks, Rob. So for many of you on the call, you'll be familiar with the industry self-regulation that has existed over the last few years, notably the MLC, which was set up by Congress in the US. It is a US body, but is de facto global standards for many markets. There's the Trustworthy Accountability Group, formerly JICWebs. There's the IAB Gold Standard for its members, the Conscious Advertising Network, as Rob mentioned as well. And whilst these are all good, solid approaches, it is somewhat of a patchwork quilt and quite confusing, all of which are opt-in. It's very challenging, I think, for people to actually to understand how they work in coordination, which ones to pick. And many of you will be familiar with previously GARM, which had to dissolve in light of the Musk lawsuit in the US off the back of the House Judiciary Committee investigating them. And that's very much left a hole in terms of global alignments and having a forum, helpful forum for aligning advertisers, agencies, publishers, platforms together. And what that's meant, particularly that geopolitical scrutiny, it's meant that advisors to advertisers have backed off giving proactive advice for fear of being caught in the purview of that committee's hearings and further lawsuits in the US, notably those that are actually sort of domiciled in the US, particularly nervous. So it's leaving advertisers essentially having to take their own counsel and to have limited counsel and ability to work with its immediate advisors. And compounding that, I think that the self-regulatory approaches, whilst good, are very much seen as opt-in. And what we've seen over the last couple of years, businesses very much viewing it as an ROI opportunity rather than cost of doing business. And essentially, as Rob touched on before, if we do not lean into further developments and the self-regulatory approach, then government and others will do it to us. To that end, Rob mentioned at the beginning of the section our responsible media guide, which is essentially guidance to members bringing together a number of work streams which we work on with many partners on the call, and includes the brand safety section. And essentially, you found a way to sort of thread the needle through those self-regulatory initiatives and actually providing an advertiser sort of guide in terms of how they navigate brand safety. And of course, as we talked about as well, we have our media services framework, which has evolved over the last 9 years, which guides members through all aspects of working with their agencies and supply chains, and that includes brand safety too. But there's still a fundamental issue, and that is provenance of media. The transparency often through the supply chain comes at a cost, and it's seen if you want what we would regard as being necessary transparency, you have to pay for it. It's not as a baseline. It is not delivered as a baseline. And often we're seeing sort of conflation between what we believe to be commercial confidentiality and placement of advertising, which we think is essential, that should be absolutely transparent. And we saw that through some of the programmatic studies which we led in 2020 and 2022. And our partners, our sister trade body in the US, also did similar studies. And to give you some flavour of that, many would be familiar with that, we found that on average, advertisers were actually spending on 40,000 sites in our study in 2020. That dropped marginally to 27,000 sites in 2022. And the ANA found on average with the advertisers in their study, that was 44,000. And many of the advertisers, when we actually then revealed that, and the number of websites, many of which can still be masked and were masked, they were surprised at the volume of essentially of sites which they were appearing on, and consequently took actions, independent actions, to reduce that. So as Rob mentioned, what can we do about it as an industry? Well, these online advertising task force roundtables in relation to brand safety, which we're co-chairing, we think are incredibly important to gather together industry stakeholders to actually talk to government about what's being done and what self-regulatory approaches are being done. But also, I think we have to be very humble and actually looking at this and saying, are we doing enough? And arguably, because of the evidence at hand, we're not doing enough as an industry. So we need to lean into what more can we do and actually be sort of pragmatic and open to making changes and doing that proactively, working with governments and working, we think, trying to find a balance between a regulatory and self-regulatory approach rather than always trying to push back a regulatory approach. But we need to make sure that's informed and proportionate regulation, of course. And as Rob said, we think that that's going to translate into an evolution of the Online Safety Act. And we need to be open and lean into that. And in the meantime, work on those self-regulatory approaches to look at where we can find improvements. And we're going to be doing that through those roundtables. So we've had a series of roundtables. We're going to be reporting back to the task force with ministers on Thursday this week. We'll then collaborate again with all stakeholders that have been involved in that, looking at how we translate some of those recommendations into actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. So moving on to our next strategic priority and what that means for this year, I'm going to hand over to Nick to do this.
Thank you, Simon. So helping advertisers navigate the changing environment has been a core pillar for ISBA probably since our inception. And over the past couple of years, we've been working in various forms on guidance around the adoption of AI and the impact it's having on our members, as well as broader changes in the agency and media landscape. But so part of the BAU activity that will be continuing is very much around that adoption and scale of AI. We're releasing on Thursday guidance on using Gen AI in creative, which has been pulled together through insights from our AI steering group and looks at the considerations and some of the challenges members are facing as they seek to take their pilots and scale them up and identify the right use cases and the right ways to navigate consumer perceptions of the use of AI, as well as the various ethical considerations. And that builds very much on the work that we did with the IPA back in 2023 on the 12 principles for the responsible use of AI in creative services. And to also bring that to light for members, we've got an increasing number of members that are more open to speak about the endeavors they're pursuing, the practical implications, and we've got sessions fleshing out how this impacts your operating model coming throughout the year as well. This will be the third year of us doing a Gen AI adoption survey and event, and we're quite proud to, again, on that point, be able to have more advertiser-led voices leading the stage this year. And one of the things that's come out quite strongly, whether it's in the Advertising Association's work on skills or through our own investigations with members, it's that there is a strong demand for AI skills in our membership base. So when we surveyed members last year, back in July, I think it was about 47% said that they've not received any form of AI training for the use of these new tools available to them in terms of its application for advertising or their work. So we piloted a session just last week, and we'll be launching that in April to help members get hands-on experience and understand how to use it effectively in their day-to-day work. There's been a lot of conversation. We're quite fortunate to have records going back to the last century, and outcome-based remuneration models has been a strong passion point for our members, going as far back as I can see records. However, there seems to be a bit of a divide between the ambitions of both advertisers and agencies and the reality of being able to remunerate based on outcomes. And this is reflected in the IPA's work last year, titled "The Price Isn't Right," which speaks to the dominant force for remuneration remaining time and materials. And so with a lot of the conversations about how technology is going to radically change the way that agencies can be remunerated, agencies also transforming their structures, we'll be studying with members and with agencies, what does the future of agency commercial and remuneration models look like? And in practice, how do you implement outcome-based remuneration? And expanding on the skills questions that have been raised, we'll be expanding our one-on-one training program, our mentoring scheme, and our overall skills resources for members to help develop those skills that are necessary for the future. And we'll be leveraging our great network of in-betweeners, people, senior leaders that are in transition between roles, to see how we can leverage that brain power into the various work that we have. So going into what does this mean for a big bet? So operating models of the future will be our big bet in this space, and bridging the gap between theoretical frameworks and in practice, what do they look like? What are the barriers, and what are the considerations that you need to navigate? And as touched on with the BAU work, there is a critical piece around skills. What are the skills of the future? Where will they come from, and how do we develop them? And these are the conversations we'll be having with members and fleshing this out. And as I mentioned, with the expansion of our one-on-one programs, helping develop those appropriate skills. One of the big things is the requirement for a broad range of disciplines to feed into these sorts of conversations. And we've been very successful in broadening the skill set in our membership that we can bring to bear to these types of debates. And we'll be bringing them together to leverage their insights in the practical application of the challenges that they're exploring, the conversations they're having, and drawing on some of the more advanced use cases to understand the learnings, what do they mean in practice, and flesh out these conversations throughout the year. And this is with the ambition of being able to articulate what are the options facing members to build future fit operating models, what are the trade-offs and the considerations, and how do you navigate what is right for your organization? And then how do you implement that in a practical way that it'll be successful? So if we go on to what does this actually mean in practice? So why is this a problem, rather? Addressing the question of future fit operating models is not as simple as it used to be. So I think the conversation around in-housing versus outsourcing and the trade-offs that exist there, the risk-reward benefits have been, the maturity and understanding of these has become quite strong in recent years. And this is reflected in the research that we did with our members back in 2023 on in-housing that showed quite an interesting set of dynamics in which roughly half of those that engaged on in-housing work had achieved the objectives that they sought to achieve and were very, very positive in terms of the endeavors that they'd embarked on. And yet there was also another half, a bit of a broker divide, who had not achieved the objectives that they set out. And when teasing out was this random with the drivers of success or failure, it was interesting to see that it was very much the intention at the beginning of that journey that was a strong determiner of whether or not you achieved your ambitions or not. And seeing that those that were very much strategically aligned to unlocking greater capability and unlocking a competitive advantage found that they had vastly more successful in-housing journeys than those who predominantly were seeking a saving. So through that research, I think it's been quite interesting to understand the parameters that you would take for in-housing and outsourcing historically. However, the challenge that our members are facing today is that the new capabilities and the flurry of change, either be it from agencies or be it from AI solutions, challenges a lot of the underlying assumptions and the constraints or the parameters that framed these conversations historically, opening up a whole bunch of new opportunities that can be explored on multiple fronts, and really opening up these conversations in quite a broad way very quickly. So this is where we need to help advertisers navigate these new opportunities, what these trade-offs are, and what will be the defining factors of success. What are the learnings from historic work in this space are likely to remain true and a powerful North Star, and which are the assumptions that are completely upended and need to be explored and investigated, and where are the stories that can bring to light and help advertisers navigate these opportunities. So what is changing? I touched on AI and the shifting market dynamics, but essentially 2025 was a year of lots of headlines and lots of radical change anywhere and everywhere. Actually, there was a great movie. I'm terrible at remembering the name of the movie. Ignore that. But what we're seeing with the agencies were headlines, be it mergers with IPG and Omnicom, be it acquisitions of new agencies, be it Dentsu seeking to look at revisit their international markets, be it restructures and very beloved brand names in creative agencies being renamed and consolidated, changes in leadership, divestitures, and just a lot of change in the agency ecosystem, and also implications for talent, which has come quite strong in many of our conversations with members. And what do all these changes mean for the talent in our accounts, and how do we acquire that great talent? And again, that skills question. We're also seeing with agencies a great transformation of services, with all of them pursuing different journeys in their own application of AI and technology. And that shift in structure and in services leading to lots of conversations about the evolving commercial models. And what does this mean for the way that I remunerate an agency? What does it mean for transparency? Where does my focus as an advertiser need to be in navigating this rapidly changing agency landscape? And then also, there's been the interesting rise in conversations around independent agencies and challenger agencies, and those who are proving to be quite transformative and nimble in their adoption of new technology. And where do they fit into this changing ecosystem? And then, while AI has been a great disruptor of the agency models, it's also been a great disruptor for advertisers when they look internally at the new capabilities available, once not really where technology historically may not have been as transformational in terms of strategic thinking, in terms of own personal day-to-day use. It explores new domains. But I think the areas that are the most interesting for members is the greater accessibility it provides, and that while it's highly expensive to create these models and highly expensive to create some of the opportunities and applications of these models, it's also at the same time relatively inexpensive in many of its expressions for people's day-to-day use. In ways, and also in some of these applications and new solutions being rolled out, inexpensive in terms of the opportunities that it unlocks and how it can be used. So these changing dynamics have led to a lot of traditional assumptions needing to be tested, and the constraints available to either agencies or people at advertisers potentially no longer being true, and changing what is possible. However, navigating that is all about people. Do we have the right skills to navigate this and to deploy these opportunities effectively? And so what we've been hearing from members for several years is that junior talent often don't have the level of fundamental marketing knowledge and skills that our more senior talent grew up with. And there is that question about what is the role of fundamental marketing skills and how do we build this up to the appropriate level for the market. And then where it gets really exciting is the evolution of I-shaped talent to becoming the T-shaped person. And now the conversation around where do we find the ever-elusive M-shaped people who have a great breadth of knowledge and depth of knowledge across many verticals, who are typically considered to have that capacity for innovation, for greater creativity, and more resilient and more capable with complex problems and navigating what is a very rapidly evolving and complex infrastructure. So the question for us is, how do we support our members in addressing that scarcity and changing it from a rather scarce landscape to one where our membership has greater access to talent who have that fundamental understanding of what great marketing looks like and that great breadth and flexibility to navigate all these different discussion points. And so this is where we'll be working with our members to bring together guidance on future operating models, what they look like, and for your organization, what are the trade-offs and considerations to build the right model for you and your business. With that, I hand back to Simon.
Thank you, Nick. So as you can see, three big strategic priorities: enabling effectiveness and trust in advertising, ensuring transparency of supply chains, and helping members navigate the future. And underneath that, a huge amount of BAU activity, the things that ISBA has always done that we will continue to do, but three big bets, one against each of those strategic priorities. So a balanced approach to growth marketing, shaping the future of a brand safe online environment, and building future fit advertising operating models. So the balanced approach to growth marketing, that's really being driven by our members. It's a conversation that we've had with our most senior members. It's the single biggest challenge that they are encountering in the boardroom. It's the kind of roadblock to so much of what they're trying to do to drive growth in their businesses. So that is one that we are leaning into heavily as ISBA, but with the full support of the industry behind us. As we say, that is a joint industry initiative that ISBA will be convening starting soon this year. The second one, shaping the future of a brand safe online environment, as Rob said, this is one where this is coming whether we like it or not. You know, we can see this is being driven by government, by society. There is a head of steam building. This is one where it is far better to be at the table and to have a hand in shaping what this looks like. And representing advertisers and representing advertisers' interests to ensure that the outcome is one that is kind of suitable for us at both an industry and advertiser level. And then last but not least, the building the future fit advertiser operating models. Again, this is one that is being driven by our members. This is a necessity. There is no choice. Our members know that they are needing to evolve their operating models, but as we've seen, it's complicated. It's no longer a binary, question of in-house versus outsource. There are lots of nuanced elements to this now. Tech is having a massive impact, shifting dynamics in the marketplace with evolving agency operating models. Mergers and acquisitions are all leaning into this one, and so this is one that is about helping our members to plot a path through it rather than giving a kind of silver bullet solution to it. So those are our big bets for this year, and you've seen the BAU activity that will be kind of going on below the surface of the water. There will be a lot more information available from us if you'd like to engage on any of these. For more information, as you can see, please email any of us that you have direct contact with, or if you're new to ISBA, please use the email address there. Feel free to follow up with us individually, but otherwise, thank you very much, and we hope this morning was useful for you.